On day number 20, we arrived in the Loire Valley. Here we would have a brief glimpse of the Chateau region of France and stroll through the quaint streets of Amboise. We would take a bus out to Chambord and visit the little market set up there before embarking on a private tour out to the estate of Chenonceau. Bienvenue en Val de Loire. We arrived in the Loire Valley in the late afternoon after traveling from Carcassonne to Bordeaux and from there to Amboise. It had been a long and warm day of travel, and our Airbnb was the perfect little spot to settle in before finding somewhere for dinner. The hostess of our Airbnb was exceptional and provided a stylish and well-stocked apartment. We discovered several different tasty finds in those cabinets. This Airbnb felt so much like a home away from home, and we loved getting to stay here. The apartment was also conveniently located on the island in the middle of the Loire River, right on the bridge that led to historic Amboise. This was an ideal and central place to stay while in the Loire Valley. Once we had been revitalized, we set out to see the historic square of Amboise and decide on a dinner location. Amboise as a town dates back to the 6th century, but it wasn't until the 11th century that the keep of the Chateau was built. It was a residence of the French monarchs from the 15th to the 17th century, and also saw the persecution of Huguenots before the Edict of Amboise in 1563 that granted freedom of worship to Protestant nobility there. After much deliberation and a bit of a wait, we were seated at a creperie for dinner, where we enjoyed 2 different galettes or savory crepes and a sweet crepe. They were yummy, and I'd happily take another of each. After adding our pin to the map at the Airbnb, we turned in for the night in order to set off for Blois the next morning. Once arrived in Blois, we tried very hard to discover where on earth the tour bus was going to pick us up. Eventually, we were informed the bus stop was in the middle of a gravel parking lot next to the train station. Thankfully, we had an hour to discover this important detail. The trip out to Chambord took about 20 minutes, and with it being a weekend and in shoulder season, the bus only had about a dozen of us aboard, making it a nice quiet ride. Once at Chambord Estate, we decided to opt out of a tour inside and simply enjoy the outside at this location. Here there was also a market set up, and we enjoyed perusing the wares and regional farmers market items.
Like soups and stews and everything.
Chambord is one of the most iconic chateaux in the Loire Valley. It is also the largest, its size being 6 times larger than the rest of its neighbors, even though it was originally built to serve as a hunting lodge. The architect who is said to have created the original design of the chateau was Domenico da Cortona, but Leonardo da Vinci seems to have also been an influencer in the layout of the structure. It took 28 years to finish this chateau, and the blueprint looks to have changed more than once during that time. The exterior of Chambord is made up of several different elements, including chimneys to 282 fireplaces that create a grid-like pattern with an Italian flair. Though we did not tour the inside of the chateau, it does offer some intriguing designs within its massive walls, including the renowned double helix staircase and 440 rooms, though only 80 of them are open to the public. After our chilly exploration of the grounds of Chambord, we purchased some fresh strawberries and climbed back on board the bus. Though the tour bus stops at 4 different chateaux, we needed to return to Amboise in order to meet up with our hostess, who had kindly offered to take us to Chenonceau that afternoon. This beautiful chateau is nearby to the town of Chenonceau, and the lands were incorporated into the Crown estate all the way back in 1535. Shortly thereafter, it sort of exited the Crown lands, which in the long run saved it from the French Revolution. Catherine de' Medici lived here for a time after the death of King Henry II and ruled France from her study, the Green Cabinet. Fast forwarding to World War I, the chateau served as a military hospital for the duration of the war. Over 2,250 wounded were treated here during that time, its cost being covered by Gaston Menier, who was the owner of Chenonceau at that time. During the Second World War, the Menier family helped to smuggle individuals out of the grasp of Nazi tyranny, and the Great Gallery at Chenonceau became the sole point of access to the Free Zone. It really is a beautiful chateau, and it is the second most visited castle in France, second only to the Palace of Versailles. We were grateful to have been given a private tour by our hostess and see a side of the chateau that most tourists do not get to see. Thankfully, before our travels, I had a rough grasp of the French language, so though our hostess shared with us about the chateau's architecture and history entirely in French, Understanding the language was beginning to come easier after spending a week immersed in the culture, and it was such a neat opportunity to learn on a couple different levels. Back in Amboise, we strolled over to the square and enjoyed stepping into a chocolatier shop before finding a table at another restaurant on the square for dinner. The Loire Valley was a short stop on our itinerary, but it was very much worth it and gave us just enough of a taste to make us want to return there one day. It was the perfect place of repose before taking on the final city of our European travels, Paris, and that would most certainly be an adventure.